1939 are once again under Nazi domination. One of them is a Jewish teenager who would become the world's most famous diarist, Anne Frank. Anneliese Marie Frank was born on the 12th of June 1929 in Frankfurt, Germany, to Otto and Edith Frank. Anne also had a sister, Margot, who was 3 years her senior. The sisters had a happy childhood, playing almost every day in the garden with the children of the neighborhood. The Franks were liberal Jews and lived in an assimilated community of Jewish and non-Jewish citizens of various religions on the outskirts of Frankfurt. Their life changed dramatically when on the 30th of January 1933, Adolf Hitler, the leader of the Nazi Party, was appointed Chancellor of Germany by the German President Paul von Hindenburg. The Nazi regime quickly began to restrict the civil and human rights of the Jewish people and established the first concentration camps, imprisoning its political opponents, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, and others classified as dangerous. Because of business problems and growing anti-Semitism, Otto Frank decided to leave Germany and move to the Netherlands. In September 1933, he founded a franchise for the Amsterdam branch of Opekta Company that traded in pectin, a gelling agent for making jam. The rest of the family moved to Amsterdam soon after. The Franks were among 300,000 Jews who fled from Nazi Germany between 1933 and 1939. After the experiences of the Third Reich, the family soon felt at home in Amsterdam, and the girls enrolled in Dutch schools. They made new friends, and despite initial problems with the Dutch language, they became excellent students, especially Margot. While the girls seemed to be happy about their new life in their new country, for their parents the situation was more challenging. Otto had to work hard to get his company going and build a new life for his family. However, the financial situation of the family improved in 1938 when Otto started a new company called Pectacon, which was a wholesaler of herbs and spices. Seeing the development in Nazi Germany and its aggressive expansion, he even wanted to set up a new business in Great Britain and move there, but his plan did not work out. The Second World War started on the 1st of September 1939. Anne Frank was 10 years old when Germany invaded the Netherlands on the 10th of May 1940. The life of the Franks, who were once again under Nazi domination, changed completely. The criminal Nazi regime from which they ran away in 1933 finally caught up with them in the country which became their new home and had made them feel free to live their own life. The Netherlands became an occupied territory, and it did not take long for the Nazis to begin introducing new anti-Semitic laws and regulations restricting the lives of Jews. Jewish civil servants were fired, and Jewish businesses as well as the Jews themselves had to be registered. They could no longer visit parks, cinemas, or non-Jewish shops. Many places thus became off-limits to Anne, who could no longer go to the same school, as all Jewish children had to go to separate Jewish schools. According to new laws, Jews were no longer allowed to run their own businesses, and the Nazis forced Otto Frank to give up his companies. However, Otto had managed to transfer control of his businesses to his employees soon enough to keep his companies out of Nazi hands. The situation got worse in 1941 when Jewish men were arrested during raids and then deported to Mauthausen concentration camp. Among them were friends and acquaintances of the Franks, and reports of their deaths were soon to follow. Otto understood that the situation was critical and tried to emigrate to the United States and Cuba. However, he never managed to obtain the necessary documents. It was in the spring of 1942 when Otto Frank, anticipating deportation of his own family, decided to set up a hiding place in an empty part of his business premises at Prinsengracht 263. Regulations which forced Jews to wear a yellow badge in the form of the Star of David as a means of identification were announced in the Netherlands on the 29th of April 1942. Those caught without a badge after the 5th of May when they came into effect were arrested and detained for a 6-week period. The systematic deportation of Dutch Jews to the death camps started in the summer of 1942. Transports regularly left the transit camps of Westerbork and Vught. Out of 140,000 Jews who lived in the Netherlands by the beginning of the Second World War, 107,000, including little children, were deported mostly for Auschwitz and Sobibor by September 1944. Out of the 107,000, Only 5,000 returned after the war. Before going into hiding, the 12th of June 1942 was probably the last happy moment for the Frank family. It was the day when Anne celebrated her 13th birthday and received her diary. A diary which would one day make her famous and in which she would write about her feelings and thoughts during the difficult times that were to come. Less than 1 month later, on the 5th of July 1942, Margot, Anne's sister, received a call-up to report for a so-called labor camp in Nazi Germany. Knowing the fate of their friends and acquaintances who had been sent to such camps and never returned, the Franks did not hesitate for a moment. The next morning they went into hiding in order to escape persecution. In the secret annex, the family would spend a long 761 days. After 7 days, the Franks were joined by the Van Pels family, made up of Hermann, August, and 16-year-old Peter, from whom Anne would receive her first kiss in the secret annex. In November, they were joined by Fritz Pfeffer, a dentist and family friend. It is in Anne's diary, thanks to which we know how the Frank family and 4 others lived for more than 2 years in a 3-story space entered through a revolving bookcase. The people in hiding were completely dependent on 6 helpers. They were employees and friends of Anne's father, who provided food, clothing, and everything necessary to the 8 people in the secret annex between 1942 and 1944. Writing helped Anne pass the time, and it's thanks to her diary that we can get a glimpse into the everyday life of the people in hiding. It was important to be silent, especially from 8:30 a.m., when the men in the warehouse, which was located below the secret annex, started their workday. Any sound could cause suspicion. The morning was devoted to reading, studying, and preparing for their lunch break. At 12:30 p.m., when the warehouse workers went home for lunch, a few of the helpers came up to the secret annex to have lunch with those in hiding. Mipris usually stayed in the office to keep an eye on things. The people in hiding could see other faces and listen to Radio Oranje, which was a program broadcasted by the BBC where the Dutch Queen Wilhelmina, who on the 13th of May 1940 had escaped from the invading German troops and travelled to England, spoke 34 times during the course of the war. While in the afternoon some people in hiding took a nap, Anne used to write or study. Then they had a coffee, prepared dinner, and at 5:30 p.m., when the warehouse workers went home, the people in hiding could leave the secret annex and spread out through the building. They would cook dinner and took turns using the bathroom, as they did in the morning before the warehouse workers started their working day. The situation became more dangerous after September 1942, when special units were formed made up of Dutch collaborators that began hunting for hiding Jews. An estimated 25,000 Jews went into hiding in the Netherlands. 2/3 of them survived, and 1/3 were betrayed and discovered. The 8 people in the secret annex belonged to the latter group. To this day, we do not know the reason for the police raid, but the hiding period came to an abrupt end on the 4th of August 1944. Dutch police officers, headed by SS officer Karl Silberbauer, went to investigate a tip-off that Jews were hiding in the upstairs rooms at Prinsengracht 263. The hiding place had been discovered, and Otto and the others were arrested. While Silberbauer confiscated their valuables and money, he scattered out the papers and notebooks. After people from the secret annex were taken to the Gestapo headquarters in Amsterdam, 2 other helpers took the documents before the secret annex was emptied by the order of the Nazis. Anne's diary and other manuscripts survived. From a prison in Amsterdam, they were sent to the Westerbork transit camp. They ended up in the prison barracks, and the men and women were separated. Otto had to work during the day, but in the evening he could be with Edith, Margot, and Anne. After a few weeks, they were sent to the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. Their train was the last one to leave Westerbork for this extermination camp located in Nazi-occupied Poland. The train journey took 3 horrible days, during which Anne and over 1,000 others were packed closely together in cattle wagons. There was little food and water, and only a barrel for a toilet. Upon arrival at Auschwitz, Nazi doctors checked to see who would and who would not be able to do heavy forced labor. Around 350 people from Anne's transport were immediately taken to the gas chambers and murdered. While Otto ended up in the camp for men, Anne, Margot, and their mother Edith were sent to the labor camp for women. After the war, survivors described them as an inseparable trio. Otto would never see them again. When in early November 1944, Anne and Margot were deported to the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, their parents stayed behind at Auschwitz. Edith died of weakness and disease on the 6th of January 1945, 3 weeks before the Red Army liberated the camp. At Bergen-Belsen, Anne reunited with her friend Nanette Blitz, who survived the Holocaust and described Anne as bald, emaciated, and shivering. She added that Anne did not wish to live any longer, as she believed her parents were both dead. Anne also did tell her that she hoped to one day write a book based on the diary after the war would be over. Sanitary conditions were terrible, and there was no water for washing and hardly enough for drinking and cooking. Between January and March 1945, when the prisoners were sent on death marches from the other concentration camps, about 1/3 of the prisoners who arrived in the transports were already dead, and almost 80% of the rest had to be fetched by truck from the station, as they were too weak and sick to walk. On one occasion, out of a transport of 1,900 inmates, over 500 arrived dead. The prisoners got almost no food during these death marches, and there was no food when they arrived at the camp either. The camp was so overcrowded that during the winter months when it was freezing cold, the prisoners had to sleep in a sitting position on the floor and somehow try to share only 200 blankets in a camp of tens of thousands of prisoners. Due to starvation, thirst, and the outbreak of typhus epidemics, the average daily mortality rate of the prisoners was between 250 and 300. In these terrible conditions, Anne and Margot contracted typhus as well. After the war, Gernot Turgel, a survivor of Bergen-Belsen who worked in the camp hospital and knew Anne, remembered seeing her and in her own words said that Anne was delirious, terrible and burning up. She also brought Anne water with which to wash. But unfortunately, Anne and her sister did not survive. After Margot fell from her bunk in her weakened state and was killed by the shock, Anne died 1 day later. They both died in February 1945, owing to the effects of typhus, Margot first and Anne shortly afterwards. It was initially believed that the sisters died a few weeks before the camp's liberation on the 15th of April 1945. However, it was later revealed that they may have died as early as February. Anne and Margot are among the millions of victims who were sentenced to death by starvation, thirst, illnesses, ill treatment, or extermination with Zyklon B gas. However, there was one person from the secret annex who survived. It was Otto, Anne's father. He was liberated on the 27th of January 1945 when the Soviets entered Auschwitz. On the way back to the Netherlands, he found out that his wife Edith had died, but he hoped that Anne and Margot had somehow survived. He returned to the liberated Netherlands on the 3rd of June 1945, 9 days before what would have been Anne's 16th birthday. All hope was lost when 1 month later he learned about the death of his daughters. Mépris, one of the helpers of the secret annex, passed him Anne's diary. After he found enough courage to read it, he was astonished by her writing. He also read about Anne's dreams to become a writer and journalist, and her intention to publish her stories about their life in the secret annex after the war would be over. In the end, Anne's dreams would come true. First, 3,000 copies of her book, Secret Annex, were published in 1947. Since then, the book has been translated into over 70 languages. People all over the world were introduced to Anne's story, and in 1960, the hiding place, which for 2 years became the home to 8 people who tried to survive the atrocities of the criminal Nazi regime, became a museum, the Anne Frank House. Today, you can even visit her room that has walls brightened with picture postcards and movie stars which Anne collected, and see her original diary and other manuscripts, which she wrote until her arrest. Anne Frank, a teenage girl who perished in a death camp and whose only sin was that she was a Jew, has become a symbol which will live forever and will always remind us of the dangers of discrimination and racism and hatred towards each other.